expecting the guy with the fuzzy white beard over here. Unfortunately, he's off today, and we wanted to make sure that we got a very special guest in today, and she's up for re-election, and she's actually one of my wife's favorite legislators as well as mine, because when my wife had to go testify in front of Public Health Committee about our son's genetic disorder, she looked over at my good friend Theresa Conroy over here.
Thank you.
And you just were able to like bring her through like that whole thing, because I know how difficult it is to go up there and testify and to talk in front of people. I know you're a little bit shy, but you'll never admit it.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for coming to the 105th District. This, where we're filming today, is actually in my district.
See,
So
we actually get to do a show right here.
Sure, yeah.
Right here in Seymour. But so you're up again.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking the streets. I look at you. You're the Democratic island, like surrounded by like all the Republicans around you.
Yeah.
How do you manage to deal like with all of that? That you get so much support. I don't think it's not just Democratic support. You get a lot of Republican support too.
I do, and I think my philosophy is, I'm a Democrat, but I just don't represent Democrats. I represent everyone in my district. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of listening, because I could go up there and have my own personal views of how I want to vote on things, but that's not doing justice to everybody in the 105th District. So I make sure that I, listen to my people, get back to them, and I found, even people, when you said Republicans, sometimes I'll have those emails going back and forth, and somebody will say, well, you have to do this, and I'll go back to them and say, this is the situation. This is what I've done and why I'm voting why I did. And this one person I'm thinking of in mind right now has come back to me and said, by now you must know I'm a Republican. But I appreciate that you put a lot of thought into what you're doing, because now I can sit back and say, I might not agree with her, but she has the big picture and she's doing it to the best for all of us. So, sometimes it's a struggle for me. You have to really walk a fine line, and at times I have to go against my caucus. But I think it makes me a stronger legislator up there, and I'm a better representative for the people that I do represent.
And I know people appreciate that. I know I certainly appreciate that. And I know you're currently, you are co-chair of the internship committee. You're on the vets committee still. So
Yeah.
I'm double checking here. My favorite, of course, public health, which we're going to talk about our real big public health emergencies that are going on right at the moment.
And planning and development.
You are on planning.
I am
and
on planning and development also. Right.
So now, what do you do as far as like with the internship committee? Because I know you're co-chair in that.
Yeah. So the internship committee is very special to me. I'm a nurse, so I started off with an associate degree. And when I was going back to my bachelor's degree, I took some courses up at Naugatuck Valley Community College. And I was in my early 30s. The one thing I didn't have as an associate degree was a political science course. And, they have Poli-Sci 101 as a, prerequisite or a requisite. And someone up there said to me, you're so active in your community that you don't need one of these 100 levels. How about doing this internship up in Hartford? And I thought, all right, let me get a little more information on it. So I actually was an intern back in, I want to say, the late 80s, early 90s, around there. Yeah, I did that for a semester, 2 days a week. I interned for Representative Sean McNally, who's now international all over the world. But I learned a lot from up there. And I said, if I ever run for politics, this is the office that I'd like to hold. It just sparked in me that I can make changes that are good for my local community, but also for the state. So that's how I got involved as being an intern. But being an internship committee, I love mentoring students. I love giving them the opportunities to be able to see what we can do in politics. It could be as simple as, helping me write testimony. But I try to grow them through the whole process. When I start off with an intern, I usually give them one of the big bills that I'm working on to follow through the whole process. And I also let them know this bill and this bill number now is probably not going to be what you're going to see at the end product, because we all
I've
have
been
that.
there.
Yes, so we all have that idea of it, this bill, but we've seen how they can be stripped out, changed, and so it's a whole process that they get to see, and I think their experience is much better. I'm fortunate, I have interns that stay on with me even after
Oh, wow.
they're done. I have 2 right now. One just graduated from Quinnipiac. He's still out there working on some legislation with me. And I have another one that's actually, she's a nursing doctoral student down at Fairfield University. She's pretty much my right-hand man through the summertime, helping me develop a lot of policy. So I am fortunate, and I think that's a testament to myself on how I can mentor these people and help them through their careers.
Well, I think inspiration. I mean, I look at a lot of the current legislators. They've all had some experience working as aides, and really getting to understand the process and how things all unfold. Because, it's not like the old Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a bill on
Right. And you say that though, but
it is and it isn't.
It is and it isn't. So it's sometimes when I go and speak to different schools, I have that little clip thrown in my presentation, because it does give you a little bit of humor in how this does move through. So, yeah, it can change.
And obviously being able to listen to your constituents and understanding the issues, as an overall, is really critical to that whole process. Because, like I said, I mean, when I read through, and I read through laws every once in a while, and I try to do it with a critical eye, and it's some of the wording within there is just so complicated. Sure. And you would think it would be, straightforward, but there's always 2 sides to the coin, and there's always 2 sides to every single issue, and where we think that things should change right away, they have to follow a certain path, because there are 2 sides to that. I mean, just talking about the medical, you have to deal with the doctors, the medical society, you have to deal with the patients, you have to deal with some of the big institutions, which are somewhere in between the 2. And it gets complicated. I know you have a lot of medical experience, obviously, because you're an advanced practice nurse, but you've also worked for the West Haven VA.
I retired from there.
And you also worked for Middlesex?
I did. After I retired, I went to Middlesex for a year, and that was right before I ran for office the first time.
So you understand a lot about the system from the inside.
I think I do, especially for that. And then, when I first ran, people said, what kind of political background do you have? And I said, well, I'm a nurse. And, nurses usually downplay what we do in life. But I was also a nurse manager.
Yep.
And I also was a union president. So I did both those hats. And I always thought afterwards, nurses can do this job as a legislator very well. Because we've learned already how to compromise, we learned how to negotiate, we learned how to prioritize. So those 2 roles that I did as a union president and also on the management side gives me that perspective of how to view different sides of whatever issue we're talking about.
And what's obviously important to me is I like the fact that there are people from all walks of life that are up there, and it's not just one big, lawyer love fest. That there are people, and especially in the House, that truly reflect the different communities that they come from. Right. And I know you're heavily involved, obviously, because you're Derby, Beacon Falls. This used to be like the manufacturing corridor.
Right.
For years. Yeah. I mean, there were some big, huge institutional things that have been around. I know manufacturing is different than what it used to be.
Absolutely, yeah. And when you say that, these were all mill towns back in the day. We had the Naugatuck River right here that was the power for a lot of these manufacturing mills along the river. That's kind of changed over the years, but Connecticut really is trying to be the leader in the nation on manufacturing. And, I love this role that I'm in because I learn every day something new. I started off going over to Platt Tech over in Milford. One of my constituents is the director of the manufacturing program there, Dave Tuttle. And he's known throughout New England as having the best program in the state. That's technical high school. So even in a couple of weeks, I'll be going over there and teaching at a Teachers Institute that they have.
Okay.
They do that for local community teachers to get them to understand what manufacturing is about. They're teamed up with Southern Connecticut and the New Haven Manufacturing Association. So it's a big group. Over at Platt, they graduate about 20 students every year. And I, go over there a couple times a year, and I said to Dave, if you had the funding, how many kids could you graduate every year? And he said 60 kids, hands down, and they'll have a job. Out of those 20 that graduate, probably about 17 of them go right out into the manufacturing world, where they're starting off with salaries like $40,000 a year. About a couple of them go on to places like UConn for engineering. They go on for engineering degrees, and a couple go on for the military. So there's these slots out there. In Connecticut, we have over 4,600 manufacturers. So we always think of manufacturers and plants such as Sikorsky's, who are big employers, down here in the valley. But we also have a lot of different shops that make small products that go to places and feed bigger manufacturers.
Yeah, there's a huge supply chain
Absolutely.
for Sikorsky around Milford.
Absolutely.
I know, and their contribution to the economy is critical.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've worked down with Bridgeport Fittings down in Stratford when I was starting to learn all about this, and I went down.
I laughed just because Bridgeport Fittings. I used to run Goodwill's programs.
Okay.
We used to put together Bridgeport Fittings.
There you go. See?
On the contracts like floor.
Okay.
So yes,
yeah.
we did manufacturing.
Yeah.
down
So I've
there.
gone down there. I've toured the plant, and I have to tell you, what I've taken away is not the old factories that a lot of us in my generation and older think about. We think about the Farrells here in Ansonia, where they have a foundry, and they were dirty jobs, they were hot jobs. Now it's really precision manufacturing that we want. Oh, you can send to have little widgets made over in China.
Yep.
You're not going to get that quality work sending it over to China.
And they don't want that.
And they don't want that.
No.
In Connecticut, we have quality, high precision manufacturing. We've invested in the community college systems. There's 4 of them in the state. I'm fortunate to represent along the Naugatuck Valley in the Route 8 connector. We have Naugatuck Valley Community College up in Waterbury and Housatonic Community College on the other end in Bridgeport, that are both manufacturing centers of excellence, where the state has invested into their manufacturing programs. And this is helping to turn out what the businesses are asking for. When I talk to businesses in manufacturing, I'll say, how's your business? Do it with trepidation always, because you're used to hearing things are bad in the state. And they look at me and they said, it's never been better. And I'm taken back and said, well, what problems are you facing? And they said, we don't have enough skilled workers.
Yep.
So that is where I'm really doing my focus. This past year, we did a couple of pieces of legislation. One of them is called the Connecticut 500 Project. And it's a project where we're looking in the next 25 years, growing 500,000 new private sector jobs. That's pretty lofty when you think about it.
Especially for a 3.5 million
person but it
state.
You think it's lofty, but then, it's nice to say those things, but I think on the back end, we're preparing that workforce. We're making sure that we're going to have those people here to do that. So although it's, I think it's a lofty goal, and I hope we reach it, I also know there's a lot of work to be done over these years, and we've already started that process.
Well, as you said, manufacturing is more high-tech, so you have to have a more educated workforce that comes into it. It's not just like you could drop out of high school and you could be pretty much guaranteed to go get a factory job somewhere and be all right. It doesn't work that way anymore.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And even, one of the students that I followed through Platt Tech, he was doing an internship at Bridgeport Fittings, and I saw him running this machine that, just boggling. It had water running and, lasers and all these things. And he was a great student. He got a job afterwards, I believe, at Bridgeport Fittings. And then this past year, I heard he was going down to Florida. And I said, we're losing this brain pool that we're doing. And I said, why is he leaving? And they said, his girlfriend. I said, okay. All right. Well,
that one you could say.
Now we know. So I was surprised this past spring. I invited Senator Chris Murphy to come to Platt. Chris hasn't been to Platt Tech before, and he's very big on making manufacturing in the United States.
He does manufacturing Mondays
yeah,
or
exactly.
something like that.
So I wanted him to come and see exactly what these programs are doing. And as we were touring Platt Tech on the floor, I saw the student. And I said, oh, when are you leaving for Florida? He said, oh, I went. I said, you did? He says, I went down there for 2 weeks. He said, I was doing a job at a plant, and he said, there isn't the quality that's done up here in Connecticut. There isn't the safety being done up here in Connecticut. And this is the United States. He said, I made the decision that I had to come back here to work. So I think that's a true testament, not only to the education systems that we're providing here, but also the training and the businesses that are employing these people of what they're doing for them.
And I think a lot of times that's why manufacturers do come back to this area, is because they have that talent pool, or the kind of people that they're looking to pull into manufacturing.
Yeah. And I think many years ago we used to have in our local high schools things like shop. There would be wood shop, there'd be metal shop. In my own town, those things are pretty much gone. Metal shop all went away. I think I'm also one of those that was probably guilty. I pushed my own 2 sons, to go to college. Was it the best decision? Probably not for one of them. But if maybe he had those opportunities of seeing things like this, he would have found his path earlier. And so this year we did another piece of legislation, getting the education out to high schools, but middle schools also, because we need to get the parents to know what kind of jobs we're talking about now. There's this whole myth of this old dirty factory foundry jobs. We need to let them know that these are great jobs for their kids to be doing.
I know one of the bills that my good friend James Maroney, he was up there trying to push, was actually talking about the digital age is teaching coding as a separate language.
Right.
The way that they do it in middle school.
Right.
Because literally, I see signs on the billboards going down for Dataco, getting down to Norwalk this weekend, and they're looking for web people, web designers. And that's another big huge thing, that if we can attract those people or get them that knowledge base.
Right. And that is another big part that Connecticut's looking at doing, is that digital, the media and all the other networking. It's a big push out there. Our comptroller, Kevin Lembo, was pushing for the high-speed internet. That's going to be, I think there's a lot of barriers to overcome before we can do that. And there'll be also a lot of stakeholders that will have a lot of input into it. But if we can make sure that we're having the connections to the world out there with our internet access, that'll be a big selling point to get people into here in Connecticut.
Which I know goes back to my overall feeling about Connecticut as itself is, we're really about quality of life. And we have a good quality of life.
Right.
We have barriers to deal with within the state, and certainly I think a lot of the economics have changed over time. But, the fact that we have so much within here.
We do. And I think that's important. When 2007-8 rolled around, it became a new world in Connecticut.
Yep.
And in 2007, 2008 is when I first got into elected office. So I don't know what those good times were when you had this money here flowing in. I don't know that. I just know that we were always, trying to figure out who gets the money that we bring in from the taxes, where we get our revenue sources from. The housing market went way down. We're not getting the money from, conveyance taxes. The casinos that used to be thriving, people didn't have a lot of disposable income. They're not up there. There's a lot of areas that we're going to have to transform how we do business in Connecticut. And I think that's part of it is, getting the economic development and finding those sectors such as the manufacturing to bring great economic development here will be strong for us. People say, well, everybody's leaving Florida. Well, do that survey in the middle of January, and guaranteed, I probably would say yes. Would I go to Florida?
Yeah.
I definitely. I hate winters up in Connecticut, but I love the spring. I love the summer. I love the fall, and I love it through Christmas, and that's it for the winter. But we have, like you say, we have great people here. They're highly educated. Our communities are safe. We have our neighbors are just, we're based on communities, is how our feeling is. We have a lot of problems, though. When we just said about everybody's leaving Connecticut, when I drive through downtown Seymour, or any of the roads around here, I say to my friends sometimes, it's like, where did these people go? Because these roads have never been so busy in all my life, and I've been a resident here all my life. I'm not seeing that outflow as people are saying. We just need to make sure that we're going to keep the younger people here, and I think that's important that they can find good quality jobs here.
Well, I think obviously the case can be made about anything. I always say some things are like statistics. You know what? If you have a bunch of numbers, you can sit there and reorder them or change them around in any which direction that you want.
Sure.
And so I think it downplays, that there are people who may be looking to leave, but I think irregardless of certain circumstances, they would be looking to make that change anyways.
Sure.
And I think there are people that have, a long-term commitment to Connecticut. I mean, I've been here for 40 years. I obviously came from a different country. And, the rest of my family moved to a different area, but I chose to stay here because this is home to me. And my wife's lived here her whole entire life. This is home to her.
Sure.
This is where, where we want our child to like grow up, because we've had some of the great opportunities living down on Long Island Sound, being able to, go inland to some of the history and historic places within everything. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're right in like the corridor between Boston and New York. So, I mean, I think there's a misperception with that. And I know it does play to one side or the other.
And you can do that with
anything.
anything. I actually got an email last week, and somebody emailed me an article about how Connecticut's down in this number. And I looked at where the source came from. So I just, kind of jokingly said, well, for that one article you sent me from a very conservative agency, I could probably get you, another 20 from a very liberal agency. But let's face it, we can say whatever we want. I think when CBIA, who's, Connecticut Business Industry Associate, they're saying that we're coming up on the right. This is the first time they're starting to support some of the policies we're doing. That's huge in Connecticut, because things aren't going to transform overnight. But we need to make sure that what we're doing is having issues in place and moving it forward. And I think that's what's important to people out there, knowing, I could sit out here going, this state is a mess, and I'm going to vote no on everything that comes up there. That's not how we do work in Connecticut. I'm one of those, I'm an optimist. That glass is always half full. You can tell me something bad, I'll find something to tell you good about it. But I'm going to keep working at making it better. So that's my philosophy.
And I think it's recognizing that, yes, there are problems. And you know what? There are problems every state has. And to think that they're not.
Sure.
But it is all in how you're addressing them. And I know certainly what's out there right at the moment with police incidents that have happened in Dallas and the racial divide. I know for the people that I deal with, and I have a lot of friends in the Black and Puerto Rican caucus, that they've pushed forth legislation to address some of these things well ahead of like the curve, like cameras for police officers, not just for the public's protection, but for the police officers' protection too, because there are things that can happen that if you don't have like some like set of eyes, and obviously everybody has a cell phone camera these days and video, so it's not like it doesn't get out there. But I think that's the part of what I like about Connecticut is, we're willing to go ahead and face and address this. And I know one of the big, huge issues that's coming up now, and it's certainly it's affected my family, is the opioid epidemic, and just how explosive this has really become, and a lot of people say that we're only paying attention to this because it's now infiltrated into suburbia.
Right. And I've heard that argument. I understand that argument, but not too long ago we had about 70 deaths in the state of Connecticut. Maybe, I can't think off the top, maybe 6 years ago. Last year we had 723 deaths in the state of Connecticut. We're talking over 2 deaths every day in this state. And if you want to look at it bigger, we have 78 deaths in the country every day from opioids. Now, that's about a small jetliner going down every single day in the country. If we had a jetliner going down every day, would we do something about it?
We'd have new air traffic rules.
We would be,
or they would have like put all the planes down and grounded them until they could figure out exactly why it was going down.
But that's not how we're looking at it globally in this country. You know, a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, it came to me about these numbers were going up. And I actually went up to my leadership at the time and said, what are we doing here in the state? And my response was, you know, people weren't aware that we were on the brink of this crisis. And I said, you know what, as a healthcare leader, as a nurse practitioner, I have to do something about this. And every day I try doing more, but every day I find out we have other slippery slopes and barriers that we're up against. So, you know, I'm a part-time legislator. So that means people think, you know, we're in session this year from February to May, and we're done. I have to tell you, I'm probably almost every single day working on some kind of policy for the opioid and heroin epidemic. I'm up in Hartford at least one day a week working with people and having meetings on this. I was recently appointed this past spring to the Women in Government National Task Force on Opioid and Mental Health Disorders. So I just came back from Minnesota from a conference where we're working on a legislative toolbox. And this is, you know, women from all over the country that we sit down, we come up with policies. And I have to say, what we're doing here in Connecticut is pretty good work. Last year, we had a large bill that came out to make Narcan available in pharmacies. The idea was every pharmacy would be carrying this, so a pharmacist can prescribe it. So if you come in and you don't need it, but your son's addicted, you could come up to me as the pharmacist and say, I need Narcan. They'll train you, and you can get that.
To take it a step back,
Sure.
and I know because obviously heroin's been around for a long period of time, and so have opioids. I mean, if you think back, you know, to the Chinese epidemic where they had like the opium dens and wars and all kinds of things. You know, there used to be. I know when I was growing up, the worst thing that you could take was heroin, because once you took heroin, that was it. You were addicted. Now, I think what's killing people now is that they've mixed these with drugs that are used for pain conditions. So, and I know you and I got a master's in healthcare administration. You've been in the healthcare field for a long time.
Right.
We changed a way back where we started to focus on people with pain and pain management.
Right.
And that was one of the things that we judged doctors and surgeons and nurses and everybody else on. It was a focus of the medical community. And so they developed a lot of these, you know, very potent drugs, and even for people with chronic conditions. So now what's happening is they're taking some of these things and they're mixing them with the heroin, and the heroin is like 10 times what the strength of what it used to be.
Yeah, and you know, just going back and where that epidemic, where I'm seeing where it came from, was you're right. Pain back in the late 90s, the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Hospitals made it a fifth vital sign. So, you know, you get your temperature, respiration, blood pressure, pulse, and now your pain level is assessed. So when you go in, you know, for a visit, they'll say, you know, your pain on a scale of 0 to 10, what is it? And, you know, you always love the person that's laughing and joking and saying, oh, it's a 12. It's okay, so you have to, it's very subjective. It's whatever that person's telling you. You needed to address that. If someone had pain over 3, you needed to address it somehow. They also got rated on there by satisfaction surveys. And that was a quality measure. So it was a lot easier making sure that that patient didn't have pain. At the same time, Purdue Pharmaceuticals came out with OxyContin.
Purdue Pharma, which is right down here in Stanford.
Yeah. And it came out, and this was a long-acting narcotic, opioid. So it, you know, you do it every 12 hours. And there was a journal article, not an article, but a letter to the editor in one of the the medical journals, from a couple doctors saying, because this is a 12-hour timed period, there's not going to be those ups and downs of every 4 hours. This is going to have less addictive quality. Well, a lot of providers read that and thought this is going to be less addictive, but we didn't have the research and study behind it. And they felt safe for prescribing the OxyContin. So people start coming in with back injuries, and I can tell you, in one of those worlds, perfect worlds, if you got a back injury and you go into the ER, instead of giving you the Percocets to go, you really need to get into physical therapy right away. But it's a lot easier and quicker and doesn't cost as much as going to a physical therapist to give you those pills. I probably hear 5 out of 6 people telling me they got addicted to opioids and then possibly onto heroin from an injury. And a lot of times it's a back injury.
Yep. And
we're not handling things like that well. So, in the beginning, you keep getting them for your provider. It's easy. And then at some point, you might get cut off where they're saying, okay, step down, let's go on Motrin or whatever. And you start getting some of the withdrawal and cravings. And you start buying it on the street then. And street value for a milligram is about $1 a milligram, maybe $1.50. So you're getting, these things for $40 a pill. And at some point, you don't have that funding anymore. And heroin is much cheaper and does the same thing, although it alters your brain chemistry immeasurably. When I talk to people that are the professionals with addiction, they're telling me it's 12 to 18 months of treatment before you have that constant craving. That's a long time. We're not talking about going into a 30-day program.
No.
And, there's those barriers out there. So we're working on, we did legislation this year for first time prescribing for opioids, that you get a 7-day supply. Even when I looked at that afterwards, because we did the 7 days, I'm like, this is great. We're going to limit it so we're not overprescribing, because overprescribing is one of the areas that we're finding people, they'll get them, they'll take a couple, and they'll save them. Save them for that day that I might need it. And a lot of people keep it in their medicine cabinet.
Yep.
And we hear stories from, the teenagers, young adults going to grandma's house. I hear it from realtors. We've told realtors now, make sure when you're having an open house, tell people to either lock their medicine cabinet or to get it out, because people go around shopping in medicine cabinets. They're desperate at that point. And we need to change it down to 7 days. But I had a friend who recently had a little bit of knee surgery, not a major knee replacement, came away with Percocet that was 1 to 2 tablets every 4 hours. And I looked at the bottle, there's 50 pills. I'm like, 50 pills? And I'm like, this is an awful lot for what she had done. And I did the math. Legally, we could prescribe in Connecticut 84 of those pills. That's still an awful lot. So, I've worked with the Medical Society, just met with them a few weeks ago, trying to see out what barriers they're having. And I said, what happened? We have the prescription drug monitoring program in place now. So if you come into me,
can't do any of the doc shopping anymore.
Yeah, if I'm going to prescribe for you, I have to look in this now. And I'm going to say, oh, Dominic, you were just at Dr. X last week and Dr. Y 2 weeks ago. And I said to the doc, so what happens then when your provider finds that? And they said, well, they won't prescribe it. And I said, and what else? And they said, well, they just won't prescribe it. And I said, okay. To me, this is an opportunity now to help Dominic, to say, Dom, listen, I see you're going around. They said, well, they're not really good at it. And I said, that's fine. I will help with that. So I sit on the Alcohol and Drug Policy Council that was reinstituted with legislation last year. And I brought that up at our meeting last week and said, one of your, we have different work groups. I said, we need help for providers, that when they do find someone like this, here's the scripting to make it easier for them. You think, oh, they're doctors, they should know how to do this. No, it's not always, we also know about bedside manner things.
Yeah,
but
some doctors have good bedside manner.
Right.
And you know what? Some doctors don't want to be confrontational.
And they don't. They don't. You build up that relationship with your patient. However, you're the best one to be able to have that difficult conversation before they're going out and getting it on the street. Get them the help that they need.
Well, and I know I used to deal a lot with Griffin Hospital's pain center, because I had a client that had the same thing, long-term back problems.
Let me just clarify. clarify for Griffin Hospital. It wasn't Griffin
Hospital.
Hospitals,
No, it was the
but they
pain
rented
clinic
space.
in Griffin Hospital.
Right, it was a separate entity. Yeah, I just...
So, but one of the things that they did do, and it was very, very interesting, was they had a neurostimulator that they implanted, and God knows it was because it was in the early stages of doing this, and what it was there were two leads in the back of the head. You had like a little unit like down here, and it would send up different like pulses. Because what I learned is the way that your brain works with like pain is it's almost like it's building up like a neural pathway. So when you first take the medication, what it does is it's blocking pain sensations. Your body has its own
endorphins
and other things within it that help deal with pain. I mean, I think pain gets a bad relationship.
Right.
Pain is good because if you don't have pain, you're not going to know that you've got a problem in the first place. So what it does is these pathways, get built up. I almost think it's like going from like a dirt road to a street to like all of a sudden a superhighway. And so when I get like this little like pinch over here, it's like magnified.
Right.
To a huge level, and it's very different than for the average person who feels something like this and it doesn't really bother them. So I think that's part of what feeds the addictive cycle of needing more and more. And what was interesting with the neurostimulator was it gave the brain something else to focus on.
Right.
So that it wasn't focused on the superhighway going up to it.
Right.
So, I mean, there are all kinds of different things, but, you're talking about the brain chemistry. Even with some of the medications that are out there that I think they're realizing work better for treatment. I know for heroin, Suboxone.
Right.
Blocks
Right.
the receptors that heroin would normally act on.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the treatment. Methadone, I'm learning a lot about that, and it's a 70s medication. It's not a perfect medication, and a lot of the places where you have to go to get it is a place actually where people are dealing and doing things like that.
As I call it, it's a harm reduction.
Yeah, it is harm reduction. Absolutely.
Is exactly what it was.
But now, in the 21st century, we have things like Suboxone.
Right.
That work much better.
Yep.
But that won't work unless you're having therapy too.
Right.
It goes hand in hand. And I was out to Madison recently and sat in on a group of patients that are going through medication-assisted therapy. They have a Suboxone provider, but they also have group therapy talking about their heroin addiction. And a lot of times there's underlying illness here, mental health illness.
Yep.
And we're seeing it more and more in our society with anxiety and depression.
Yep.
And a lot of this is related to self-medicating. And it blocks the feelings. You take these things like, and Percocets or Xanax, you get that feeling like, yes, I can go talk to this person now. So it's important that not only are they getting Suboxone, but they're getting that therapy to help them to deal with stressors in life.
Which is part of what we're talking about, is that's how you change your brain chemistry.
Right. And
because as I call it, for a lot of people, drugs, they call it like it's like a love affair, and it's true, because it affects your dopamine levels, which has to do with like love, your good feelings, and everything else.
Yeah.
So your body's actually, that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a lot of the brain chemistry that's in there, and it ties in like with motivation, where you hear about the old days. They used to talk about like you would have like an obsession, like in a compulsion.
Right.
Well, there actually is of your brain, which have to do with that, and these chemicals alter that.
Right. Yeah, and I like to tell people, because it took me a while to get on board about, people would say, well, they made that choice. So I try to do two different models of how we do healthcare in the United States. First of all, we now call it a substance use disorder. Okay? They're not substance abusers, it's a substance use disorder. And that's recognized. But, I like to tell people, they'll say, well, they made that choice. And I've come up with this analogy to try to explain to people the way I think about it. I've chosen to not eat always healthy. I've chosen not to exercise regularly. I've done those things to myself. I have high cholesterol. So I am on, a Lipitor to prevent heart disease or, coronary artery disease and having a heart attack. Those are preventive things I'm doing now. Yes, now my diet's better and I'm exercising and doing those things. However, if I have that heart attack, what's going to happen? The ambulance is going to come. I'm going to immediately get the nitro. I'm going to be shipped to the ER where they're going to put lines in me. I'm going to go on a blood thinner. I'm going to go on the nitroglycerin. We're going to see what's going to go on. I'm going to go get a cardiac cath, see what's going on with my heart, maybe some other testing, and I might wind up getting a stent put in or open heart surgery. That's done. Then I go on for cardiac rehab to get my heart strong. You're a heroin overdose. You have a heroin overdose. What happens? Ambulance comes. You get a shot of Narcan. You might get into the ER. You might not. And from the ER, you're sent home. We don't do, that's like having that little heart attack and just sending you home from the ER. We don't go all the way through treatment. And we have to change that paradigm of how we're doing things in this country. Because that's the time when they come in, then we need to get them into the intensive care of detox and then right into that rehab part. And we're not there yet.
I think it all ties down to, I think, the medical industries. And dealing with a heart attack is a straightforward answer. Dealing with somebody's addiction goes into the mental health side of things and people's motivations and their free will and
and mental health
all this other stuff
hasn't been addressed well in this country.
At some point, I thought there was a bill, a federal one, that was supposed to give parity to mental health along with medical conditions.
Yeah, and we do have some of that, but not enough. This past week, I got an email from someone reaching out to me. Her husband has been, started off with an injury, was on the high dose opioids, is now a heroin addict. She's a highly educated person. When I heard her titles and things, she was crying out for help to me. And I said, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is because at that moment in time, I wasn't quite sure what to turn her to. I really, and I have all this knowledge. I'm probably one in the state that knows probably the most. I did give the healthcare advocate, and people that are listening, the healthcare advocate in the state of Connecticut is probably one of the agencies that every penny they get, they deserve, and they bring back more into the state. They will advocate for you with insurance companies. So I had her turn to them, and they're working with her. There's also a lot of groups out there that help the families. There's a CARES group, I believe, out of Newtown, that help because it's almost like an Al-Anon and alcohol. The family, it's a whole system. It's not just that person that's using. Yeah. It affects a whole family and even the whole community. So when they say it's it takes a village, it will take a village to turn this around. We're losing a generation. If people don't understand that right now, we are losing a generation. I know in Seymour there'll be in the next couple of months a screening of a film called Generation Found. And when I heard that, I said, that's what we need because we are losing people. And we can't keep going like this. We need to do interventions.
And which brings us around talking about the big thing is, when you're dealing with teenagers and other people along those lines, their brains aren't fully developed.
Exactly.
So the frontal lobes, the part of your brain which is supposed to help you with the good decision making, is not fully formed. Sure. And as I like to say, because I deal with this with brain injury and with people who have frontal lobe injuries, I try to explain to people and remind them what it was like to be a teenager. What was it like to be a teenager? Right. You thought that nothing could harm you. You were like Superman. You could go jump off of anything, do anything. You didn't pre-plan out for your future saying, well, if I do drugs today, I'm not going to be able to get into college. You're not thinking that far ahead.
Right.
You have that immediacy that you need fulfilled. I always equate it to like puppy love or your first relationship. You know, your emotions are all over the map. You know, you're hanging on every action that the person like has. When you're all of a sudden you hit, you know, past like 24, 25, 26, all of a sudden all those things come into focus, and we usually say that that's the point that people mature.
Right. Well, we have to get them through there.
It's also the point where their brains like become fully developed.
Right.
And these children, because that's what they really are, teenagers that are in between, are so much more susceptible to all of this stuff.
Right.
Because they can't think through, you know, all these consequences and everything else out there.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard, you know, when you look at it, and I keep saying a healthcare model, we always do prevention. You know, primary prevention, you get your flu shot, you prevent getting the flu. We need to focus on the prevention because that's the key place. We got to stop it there. Right. And then, you know, the treatment and recovery. Just a little shout out. I work with Valley Substance Abuse Action Council here, PM Audie, VSAC also known as. We're planning on doing a walk, an overdose awareness walk in the Valley. It's going to be at the Shelton River Walk on September 24th. It's an International Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st. But we want to make this a great event in the Valley to give support to people that are going through this, for families, but also to get the awareness out there about overdoses. So it's going to be at the Shelton Pavilion and the River Walk down there. There is a fee to join for the walk run, $25, but that money is going to go to VSAC to do education programs because we just can't get it. You know, we can't keep up with this as fast as it needs to be done. So, you know, little things like that I think are going to help the communities out here. And also FADE is another organization out of Shelton. I believe it's fighting addiction, disease everywhere. And the woman that's on the board there lost her son to a heroin overdose. So a lot of times it doesn't happen until someone's touched by it. But I'm hearing more and more every day someone's been touched by what's going on in this country.
I know I have. I mean, I've been through it with my stepson. He was involved with pain medication after an accident, became addicted, and was doing the Oxycontin for a long period of time, and he, you know, emptied out all kinds of like monies that he had, you know, available for him later on in life, and his mom literally got around to the point that the only thing that she thought that she could do for him was to have him arrested and put in jail.
And that's sad.
That's sad.
And that's very sad. I mean, we find that with mental health issues also in those young adults that, you know, there's HIPAA laws protecting them. And, you know, parents will say, you know, I want him to do something wrong so he goes to jail. At least I can sleep at night. I know he's safe. And I think, wow, this is not
you don't
the
understand
society
jail
I want to live in, though. But this
either.
is how, you know, people are grasping at straws saying, at least I know they're safe. And we need to make sure that our jails and our criminal prisons are not out there to be used as healthcare systems. No. And we're finding that. And a lot of the people in there that I've talked to are, you know, they've done petty crimes to support their habit, and you get enough of them and you're locked up in prison. That's costing us so much more than coming down and addressing the root cause problem.
Which, again, comes back to, you know, as much of the prevention, too, is, you know, people who don't touch the criminal justice system have a better life outcome.
Absolutely.
Even though they're doing the same things that person with the petty crimes is you know, gets caught for. You know, is to be able to find a way to almost like put them in like the padded suit until past a certain age. Right? You wish.
Yeah, you wish you could do that.
But you know, I think education and awareness, making people aware of, you know, what can happen with these things, so the parents, like you said, have the toolbox ahead of time.
Yeah.
You know, and know ahead of time how to be able to recognize these things, or would know, you know, that doc, don't prescribe, like, you know, this medication, or, you know, don't do this.
You have to be your own advocate sometimes. And on that end, you know, we do have DEMIS, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We have an 800 number that's available now. If anyone's looking for the help, they can go to the website, and I don't have that number with me, but also 211, the info line.
Info line, yeah.
You know, you call them if you're looking for help for a loved one or yourself. I would suggest starting right there, or you can always just write your representative and say, I need help.
Which you do.
I do,
And you reach out to other communities,
Absolutely.
and you're there really. I
Yeah.
mean, as I like to say, you know what? I go and talk to people from all over the state. So I mean, you don't just represent Seymour.
No.
You represent Connecticut, and if you're on a committee or something that's obviously important to me,
Right.
I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to find out who those people are, because if they're the ones that are making the decisions,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
they're the ones that are touching people's lives in that capacity.
Yeah, and and I always tell people when I speak to them about at meetings in the district, is reach out to your representative and senator, and get to know them. And I always say, the easiest and the best time to do that is times like now when we're not in session. Call me up and say, hey, I'm an engineer and I got some background in here. Make that connection, so when I'm looking for some help from somebody from an expert, I already have that. So when you also come to me and you're looking for things, which many people look for things, I have that connection with you already. When you email me, I always say, please don't have, thousands of form letters. And a lot of agencies will say, just send this to your representative, which is fine. And I do get that. But if you put right before all that, and I do that myself with things for Congress because I write to them too, but I always put the first few lines something personal about why I want this, because that catches people's eyes and have a lot more meaning. When you can feel what someone's going through, it does have a bigger impact.
Well, communication is an important part of advocacy.
Absolutely.
If you want to get anything done, you have to be able to communicate it. And I always try to say that I make a personal touch to whatever I do, and I'll go look at somebody's biography, find out what things that they're involved with, and just so I have a better idea, or I know where they're coming from as well too.
Right.
I know we're down to our last 5 minutes, and I know that you're running here again, literally from door to door.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to say out to your constituents out here? I mean, obviously this is going out on Channel 10, so it'll be on, and we put this up on YouTube, and it goes on all different places throughout the state. But
yeah, I've been up in Hartford now. This is my 6th year, so I'm running for re-election because I think I'm the best person and the best advocate for our community. Someone recently said to me, why would we want anybody else? You're a proven product. And I said, a proven product? I never thought of myself that way. But they know that I go up there and I fight for the issues that are important. Griffin Hospital this year was cut out of the budget for the small hospital funding pool. We had a very difficult budget session. And I went head to head. I met with Pat Charmel and Ken Roberts down there. They really gave me a tutorial on how hospitals are funded. And I didn't really realize that small hospital funding, how it keeps places like Griffin solvent. And I went back to Hartford and I fought for that. We were able to get that back in the budget. So that's difficult, but that was number one issue for people in my district. I did that, and several months later, Governor Malloy cut it out of the budget again. And honestly, at that point, I'm a citizen. I'm not a representative. And I just look and say, how can I trust the system? And I went back to bat again, because what my word is golden to me. When I give it to you, it's something I can give. It's not much I can give you, but my word. I went back, we got that reinstated, and actually the money was released last week, finally. But those are the battles that you have to negotiate sometimes. So I know people can always reach me. There's issues out there. I'm not just someone that goes to Hartford and is going to be an obstructionist. Yep. I have policy making decisions that I weigh in on things. And to me, I believe Will Rogers once said that you're not in a job when it's not like going to work. And this job to me just excites me every day that I'm able to go out there and help people. You might not agree with me on everything. I respect your opinion, and I just ask that you respect mine and listen to me for why I got to where I was. But I don't think anyone in this district has had anyone work harder than I am, or they will. I've brought money back to the district. From too many years, we send our tax dollars up to Hartford, and we send a lot of tax dollars. And when I got up there, I said, I want to make sure I'm bringing that money back down here. And I have been successful. Just Chatfield Lepresti School, that money came under my term. The Seymour High School Athletic Complex improvements. I'm working on some things for veterans right now and also for Derby. Beacon Falls, we have some long-range plans we're looking at. Those things, sometimes I get frustrated that I want things to happen yesterday.
Yeah.
But I also know I'm an advocate, and I keep going back up there. Much like you, Dominic, when we're looking for money, I am much like you going up there, and I have to meet with lots of people to get this through.
Unfortunately, a lot of times I find myself in the position of trying to hold on to what you have, and in difficult budgetary times, you have to fight hard to hold on to what you have, and to have those connections, and to have those opportunities. Certainly, being involved in the majority party, you're going to be able to do a lot more along those lines, and I certainly understand it. And I know how much you go up and how much you put your heart into it, and that you have answers, or you're looking for answers to be able to put something together to help move not just your constituents, but all of the state.
Sure.
And that's what we love about you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I thank
thank
you
you so
very
much.
much for coming here
My
today.
pleasure, always.
Like I said, I really appreciate what you do for us up there, and it's really for the whole state. So coming up this week, I think our next show is going to be with Christopher Rosario. He's going to be here this upcoming Thursday, so these shows will all be airing at a later date to be figured out, probably within the month of August. So for that, we can run the street.